What's frustrating about this whole thing is that we do not need an emergency manager. That's the last thing we need. The first thing we need is for the mayor to show some leadership.
An already desperate financial situation in Detroit could soon get worse.
Street light right here has been out for months. We've been calling about the light, but nobody's been out here to fix it. They just keep saying that they're going to file the paperwork, and it takes 30 days, but we've been calling for months.
City services are suffering, and citizens are outraged.
You know, people depend on us like I depend on this bus to get to school and to work, and it's ridiculous.
Detroit's financial woes impacting more than just the city, and leaders know it.
It's a very challenging time for the city of Detroit, and I think the region. Whatever happens with the city of Detroit is going to have an impact on the region.
Detroit in crisis. You heard the mayor. The city is almost broke and will run out of money by early next year unless big changes are made right now. Welcome to a special edition of Let It Rip. On the panel tonight, Henry Gaffney, president of the Amalgamated Transit Unit, Local 26, labor attorney Richard Mack Jr., Fox 2's Charlie Vidoff, and our legal analyst Charlie Langton. Let's get right to it. And Henry, let's begin with you because the mayor says that this is it. The city is on the brink of disaster unless he gets more concessions from your union and 40 others. What's your answer?
Well, the answer is now that the mayor didn't come to us. He came to us and laid out, this is what I want. No conversation, not asking us what are we willing to do. And there's no way that I could go back to my members and ask them to do anything more for the city at this time.
And the bottom line is some people are going to lose their jobs, period.
Yes, absolutely. If this is what, the mayor has the right to lay off if he so chooses. I had 113 of my drivers laid off as soon as he came into office because he refused to use $3 million in federal funding to keep them working. So, I mean, you just continue to give back money. You just gave back $9 million more. So, you know, it really talks about the leadership that he has in the city of Detroit.
But now, we did not hear, Richard, any mention of contractors.
Well, you know, if finally, at least use the word contractor. More than a year ago, during the negotiations with all of the unions that Mayor being engaged, I said on this station, contractors need to be part of the solution. There are $250 to $300 million worth of contracts in the budget each year. What the mayor did at that time was going to the city workers and saying, I demand 10% from you. He went to the contractors, mailed them a letter, Huel, and said, would you please give us 4%? If you don't want to, you don't have to, but please do it. If you don't want to, we'll still pay your normal wage. Can you imagine what $25 million in contractor cuts would have done in the previous fiscal year? So I have no faith that it's actually going to happen. And just think about these contracts that we're under now, most of them were imposed on the city unions. These are, when you impose a contract, it means what Mayor Bing wanted. He said, I'm going to get. You make an offer, the union says no, and you get what you offer. So what we're living under now is what Mayor Bing offered. And yet, less than a year later, we're back with a cash problem. It shows poor leadership.
Meanwhile, public safety. The residents say public safety is number one, Charlie. Mayor Bing says public safety is number one. He's not going to lay off firefighters or police, but he is going to make them pay in other ways.
You're going to make them take a cut. You said it, 10% pay cut. Now, it's important to say that the cops and fire already took a pension cut. Their multiplier went down. They get no raises. It's important to remember they don't get Social Security. Now, the city employees took the 10% pay cut, but didn't take any pension cut. So it's sort of piecemeal to me. Instead of sitting down a couple of years ago and getting everybody together and say, this is what we need to do, we're at a precipice here, and now it's sort of sticking Band-Aids on things. And you can see here, I don't know if he's got the movement or the relationship to get anything out of these guys. It's scary where we're headed.
Well, but the bottom line, gentlemen, frankly, and Charlie, let's go to you. The mayor has a hammer. If you don't give him what he says he needs, the hammer is the state appointment of an emergency financial manager.
Certainly legally, if he meets the criteria set down by the statute, signed by the governor this year, if he meets the criteria, then yes, he can have an emergency financial manager. This is a $45 million cash flow he's talking about today, but there's a $180 million budget deficit. And the way I look at this, if we just take the buses alone, other than the pay cuts, what Mayor Bing is proposing, if you eliminate furlough days, you have to pay people to work. If you have police on the buses, you have to pay those cops. If you're going to have DDOT get the right parts, which is amazing to me, you got to pay for those. And 25 more buses a month, that costs money. I don't know where there's $45 million in what he's talking about. I'm waiting to see some details. And by the way, he talked about layoffs. Where's the layoffs? That's the real hammer
he didn't
that he's got.
Did he? He didn't mention consolidation of departments, the health department in the city being folded into the county. He didn't talk about best practices for contractors. Remember, we looked into the water department, and some people aren't even bonded. We're talking about streamlining department. None of the stuff, the easy, low-hanging fruit, DDOT, for instance, they lay off 100 drivers and mechanics, but they lay off no administrators. So fully half the people employed at the bus department are paper pushers.
But he also implied that some sort of new management team is going to come in and run the bus system. Who's that?
And that's going to cost you millions of dollars. But we have a privatization ordinance in the city of Detroit that he just can't outright do that. But understand, last week when he came to the unions, he said, even if you take all these things, I'm going to lay off 1,000 people. So you want me to sit back, accept this, and wait to be laid off too?
But here's the deal. But doesn't he have to make some layoffs here? I mean, let's face
Yes.
it. Population is down.
problem-
I mean, to me, it's just a matter of where you're going to get the layoffs from. Who's going to be laid? It's not a matter of if he's going to lay off people. It's a matter of who's going to be laid off.
But wait. It's a matter of credibility because he's been ringing that bell since he's been in office. I remember the headlines last winter. If I don't get it, 1,000 layoffs. And everybody just went like this, and it never went down.
He needs to lay off some people to get credibility. That's what he's got to do.
Charlie. He needs to lead.
I agree.
The problem is you go to these unions last week and you throw out a piece of paper at them and said, this is what I'm going to do, and you barely take a couple of questions. City Council just today is complaining about the fact that they had their super committee meeting and he didn't bother to show up, didn't bother to disclose the details of what he just laid out to the unions, to the City Council, the two groups that he needs buy-in from. This should have been a joint press conference after having worked with those who really need buy-in from him. But he just says, here's what I'm going to do.
Well, what is shared sacrifice? Shared sacrifice is when 10 of us at the table and all of it takes effect.
Right.
The city, $350,000 a year for car allowances for appointees. Now, let's get real. Are we in this together, or are you just on the backs of union, and this is all union busting?
Well, among those in the audience tonight was Councilman Andre Spivey. Fox 2's Andre Isom is with him right now with some reaction to what we just heard from the mayor. Andrea.